I'm the middle child in my family. I have two brothers, one older and one younger. Growing up, both of them were involved in the Boy Scouts. My older brother, Daniel, took it really seriously. He eventually made it all the way to Eagle Scout. My younger brother tried it for a while, but lost interest and quit after a couple of years. For some reason, though, my parents never pushed me to join. Looking back, I still don't understand why. Because as a kid, I was honestly jealous of it. Whenever my mom took me along to watch my brother at scouting events, I felt like I was watching a club I wasn't allowed to join. Pinewood Derby races, award ceremonies, meetings at the local hall. I saw all of it from the sidelines. But the thing that fascinated me the most was the camping trips. Every few weeks, the troop would head up to some forest or campground and spend the whole weekend out there. I remember seeing the gear laid out in the living room before Daniel left. Tents, lanterns, sleeping bags, ropes, all that stuff. To me, it looked like the start of some huge adventure. Once or twice I rode along when my parents dropped him off. I remember seeing the boys setting up tents and gathering wood for fires. But since I wasn't part of the troop, and I was still little, I wasn't allowed to stay. So I'd watch for a few minutes, and then ride home. As a kid, that was torture. If I couldn't go camping with the scouts, I'd camp in the backyard. Our house sat on a huge property in a neighborhood where most of the yards blended into each other. Instead of fences, there were clusters of trees and bushes separating the lots. It almost felt like a little patch of wilderness already. My parents thought the idea was cute, so they helped us set up one of my brother's scout tents out back. We even had an old fire pit behind the house, so they lit a small fire so it would feel like a real camping trip. For me, it was the most exciting night of my childhood. My little brother joined us for the marshmallows, but he was only 4, so my parents made him come inside before bedtime. Once it got late, my older brother and I crawled into the tent with our sleeping bags. Back then, the handheld console everyone had was the Game Boy Advance SP, and of course, we both brought ours. We sat there under the dim glow of those little screens playing games, until we got tired. Eventually, I shut mine off and rolled onto my side, trying to fall asleep. But I couldn't. Sleeping in a sleeping bag for the first time is not comfortable. At least not when you're a kid who's used to a real bed. I remember lying there forever. The tent felt stuffy, and every little sound outside seemed louder than normal. Eventually, I must have dozed off. But sometime later, I woke up. At first, I was confused about where I was. Everything round me was dark and unfamiliar, until I remembered the tent. Then I noticed something that instantly made my stomach drop. My brother's sleeping bag was empty. He wasn't inside the tent. I figured he must have given up and gone back inside the house. The zipper of the tent was still closed though, which made me uneasy. Suddenly I felt terrified being out there alone. So I crawled over and slowly unzipped the tent. Before climbing out though, I peeked through the opening first. I didn't want to just run out into the dark backyard. And that's when I saw him. Someone was sitting beside the fire pit. The fire had died down to glowing embers, but the faint orange light was enough to see the outline of a man. It definitely wasn't my brother. It wasn't my dad either. It was a stranger. He was sitting in one of the chairs facing directly toward the tent. I'm almost certain he saw me the second my head appeared. I immediately zipped the tent back shut and dove into my sleeping bag like the thin fabric walls were somehow going to protect me. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. The inside of the tent was nearly pitch black except for the faint grey glow of moonlight through the fabric. I thought about yelling for my dad. But deep down I already knew the man outside wasn't him. Then I heard the chair move, the sound of metal legs scraping the ground. A second later, a shadow appeared against the wall of the tent. Someone was standing right outside. I held my breath and stayed perfectly still, hoping he'd think the tent was empty. Then the zipper started moving, very slowly. It slid down just a few inches. The opening was tiny, but enough. There is a small gap near the bottom of most tents where the zipper doesn't fully seal. I had never noticed it before that night, but suddenly something filled that gap, and a single eye pressed close to the opening, staring straight at me. Even in the darkness I could see the white of it. For a few seconds I couldn't move. I couldn't even scream. Then the eye squinted slightly, like the man was smiling. The zipper moved another inch. That's when I finally lost it. I screamed and scrambled backward, kicking free from my sleeping bag and knocking into the tent poles. Outside I heard footsteps sprinting away across the yard. A second later our porch light snapped on. My dad burst through the back door yelling and ran toward the fire pit. But whoever it was had already disappeared into the darkness. The police came that night, searched the area, and took statements. I barely remember any of it. All I remember is sleeping in my parents' bed and being too scared to close my eyes. 4 weeks after that, I couldn't stop thinking about that eye, just staring at me. Eventually life started to feel normal again. But about a month later, something happened that made everything worse. I went to a Catholic school. During lunch, we had a short recess in a concrete playground surrounded by a fence. One day during recess, we were playing some game where you had to run to the fence to be safe. I reached the fence and grabbed onto the metal bars. That's when someone on the other side said, "Hey," I turned. A man was standing on the sidewalk outside the fence. He asked if I knew how to get somewhere nearby. I told him I didn't know. Then he asked something that made my heart drop. "Your name's Chris, right?" The sound of his voice made something click in my brain. I immediately lied and said no. He smiled. Then he said something that still makes my skin crawl. "You don't remember me?" That's when I ran straight to one of the teachers supervising recess. When I looked back at the fence, the man was gone. One of the other kids said he saw him too. The school called my parents, and they picked me up early that day. To this day, I am convinced it was the same man who sat outside my tent that night. And every once in a while, when I think about it, I realize how close I might have come to disappearing forever.